Randy, right back to our phone callers. Next up is Jeff, listening in Stafford, Kansas. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, how you doing? I hope you're having a nice day.
I am.
Well, that's good. I've got these group of people here that are trying to convince me that the Grand Canyon proves that the world is millions of years old. Okay? They say that the volcanic rock puts out radiation in stratus in the Grand Canyon, and those stratus, if analyzed, will prove that the Grand Canyon is millions of years old. And I have this second group of people. They think that the Grand Canyon is the proof of Noah's flood, and that the water from the central and southwest drained off over the side of the Colorado Basin into and carved out the Grand Canyon in a large drainage event. Anyway, in your opinion, does the Grand Canyon prove the theory of evolution that the world is millions of years old, or does it prove the opposite? And by the way, I would like to also throw this little tidbit in on it too. What you should be able to ask about the Grand Canyon, you should be able to ask about every single river in the entire country and throughout the entire world.
Well, a couple of things. One is we did do an article in the Christian Research Journal where there's a debate on this very subject. So if you hang on, I can tell you how to get a hold of that article. But from my perspective, if the Grand Canyon were formed by the Great Flood, we should see a very different set of layers. But I think that there are other evidences that we can look to in general revelation which demonstrate, I think beyond the peradventure of a doubt, that we live in a very old universe. For example, there is the reality that nothing travels faster than the speed of light, and that billions of light years separate us from distant galaxies, which leads logically to the assumption that the age of the universe would be measured in billions rather than thousands of years. And as I've said on the Bible Answer Man broadcast, I think there's also a very persuasive argument from star life, which is measured in billions of years. Star life depends on star mass. So a star like the sun has enough fuel to burn for an estimated 9 billion years. And as such, the universe should be presumed to be at least as old as the oldest stars within the universe. And while biological history can be a matter of inference, I don't think astronomical history is a function of inference. I think it's a function of direct observation. So star formation can be observed in all stages of its life. You can see a star in infancy, a star in midlife. You can see a white dwarf star that's burned out its nuclear fuel. And on that basis, I think that we come to the inevitable conclusion that thousands of years simply do not do. Then there are also sequential layers in the formation of ice cores in places like Antarctica and Greenland, and they point to an Earth that's much older than 6,000 years.
Well, can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Don't you think that God can create a rock, a volcanic rock, with any amount of radiation that he wants to create it at? It says in Genesis, very plainly, it says, and he created the stars also. It doesn't necessarily mean that he created them during the 6 days of the creation week. It could have been for billions of years that was an insert that he put in there telling that the stars were also created, not necessarily meaning that he created them on that day.
Well, first of all, yes, I do think that God could do that. The question is, would he do that? And I think the answer is no. The notion that the universe is not authentically old but merely appears to be old, I think, creates a whole lot more conundrum than it solves. A good teacher doesn't ask his student to put faith in a textbook that's intentionally filled with lies. There's also an illustration that I've used on the show many times, which I think is appropriate in context of this conversation. I think the notion that God created his handiwork with the appearance of age is logically unfalsifiable. In other words, you can't prove it, you can't disprove it. And the example I like to use is, how could you prove false the notion that you were created 5 seconds ago and that your recollection of what we're talking about is just an implanted memory? And then consider an observable astronomical event, an event that I've talked about on the broadcast from time to time, supernova 1987A. This is an event with an identifiable before and an identifiable after. So prior to 1997, follow the logic, the nova was a star. It was a star in a distant galaxy. It was 168,000 light years away. But on February 23, 1987, the star explodes and becomes a supernova. In other words, 168,000 years ago, the star explodes. And in 1987, the light of that event finally reaches Earth, unless God created the universe 6,000 years ago. Then the supernova would be like a documentary film of an event that never really happened in the first place.